Plants were a thing for a lot of years. Even though I grew up in the industry, grew up in the garden center as an adult, I had a really hard time with houseplants. I did not do very well with them. I kind of just figured, they're not my thing. I'll stick with the outdoor stuff, and I'll skip the indoor stuff. Especially when you got kids and dogs, and you're just busy, you're like, I'll pass it for now. Lately, probably within the last 3 or 4 years, I've really gotten back into houseplants. I like the idea of having something growing and green in my home. I like it in my bedroom, I like it in my living room, in my kitchen. I really like that concept of that I'm nurturing and caring for. But houseplants are wonderful. It's that wonderful symbiotic relationship that we can have where they're helping to clean that air in our house and keep us healthier. So it's a really great thing to do. What I find though is a lot of people are afraid of houseplants. So how many of you people think, I have black thumbs? I can't grow anything. Everything I bring home dies. And I can see that, and we get frustrated, right? When we bring this precious little plant home and we're like, oh, I love this little plant and I'm going to name them, and you get attached to them, and all of a sudden they just start going, you're like, oh my gosh, what am I doing wrong? What am I doing wrong to harm this poor little house plant? So this class is kind of you kind of see the same things that people do wrong a lot. So to give you tricks on how to take care of those little house plants that you bring home. And if you guys have any questions along the way, feel free to raise your hand and we'll get those questions answered as we go along. But it's okay. Who of us has not left our cell phone on? So we're going to start with kind of the basics on houseplants. So what I find, the number one thing that people do wrong with houseplants, can anybody guess? Overwatering, yes. That is the number one mistake people make, is they tend to overwater their houseplants. And I think, some of that comes from we just want to take care of things, right? We want to nurture and take care of, and we don't want them to go dry. But when you overwater those plants, you are rotting out the roots. And they need houseplants like any other plant, outdoor in your garden in your pots. It needs oxygen. It needs that oxygen to its roots in order to be happy and healthy. And if we're overwatering it, we're not allowing the oxygen molecules to get into those roots, and we're just basically causing root rot. And so the thing about overwatering is a lot of times your plants will start to wilt, the leaves will curl, they'll get real, if it's a succulent, it's like a real puckered look to it, and we think, oh my gosh, it needs more water. So the first thing we do is go put more water on it, which is probably like the worst thing we could do. So overwatering is a bad bugaboo because it harms the roots, creates an unhealthy root system. The other thing it does is it allows for, those little gnats that just, every time you sit by your computer or you're reading a book or watching TV, and there's these little gnats just all over the place. Well, that moisture in those pots is just like you might as well put up a for rent sign for fungus gnats, because they love it when it's moist and it's warm. Well, what are you creating in your home? Moisture and warmth. And they're like, yay, we're happy. So keeping your plants too wet just allows a perfect environment for those really nasty fungus gnats that are a pest. And once they get going in your pots, it's hard to break that cycle of them. So overwatering is bad for that too. There was one more thing I was going to say about overwatering, but I've forgotten what it was. Oh well, it's Saturday morning. Great little product to help you with your watering is a moisture meter. How many of you are using moisture meters? About half. About half. This is a really, really handy tool that takes the guess out of, do I water? Do I not water? Are they dry? Are they wet? So you're basically just popping this into your soil, and the little probe will tell you, oh, it's dry as a bone, or oh my goodness, you don't need water for 3 weeks now. So it's a really handy tool to know, is it time to water, is it not time to water? The other trick with that is you need to know which plants want it to be dry and which plants want a little more consistent moisture all the time. So that's just kind of learning your plants. And when you purchase a plant, talk to the nursery people. Find out, does it like dry? Does it like wet? So you need to learn the conditions that your plant wants. So this is a really, really handy little tool in taking that guesswork out. You do not leave this in your pot all the time. You just put it in. Oh, it's wet. I don't need the water. Put it in. It's dry. Oh my goodness, better get some water on that sucker. Handy little tool. Another little tool that I like, since we're talking tools, so this is a little tiny pruner set. I always call them nippers. This is a great little one for houseplants because it's not so big that when you go to snip off a dead leaf, you're cutting half the entire plant off, right? Have you ever made that mistake? I'm just going to cut here. And you're like, oops, just gave it a major haircut. So it's really handy. It's snipping off those dead leaves. It's really handy for plants like Dracaena, or maybe you're cutting the tip off of it. Really handy for that. So it's just another really good tool that I like to keep in my houseplant little supply closet. Think about that. Oh, overwatering, I remember now what it was. Salt. We have a lot of salt in our water. So when you're putting a lot of water on that plant consistently, you're kind of keeping that salt build up in your pot. So it's just going to build, and it's going to build, and it's going to build. And all of a sudden you'll start seeing, you see a lot of Dracaenas, this one's not bad, but you'll see little black tips show up, and you're like, well, maybe it's too dry. Maybe I need more water on there. It's getting too much water, and too much of that salt is just hanging out in that pot. We have a lot of salt in our water. Some of you are using fertilizers that have a lot of salt in your fertilizer. So you're just making that worse. You're just really creating a bad environment for them. So you really want to make sure you're watering correctly. The other trick is for your watering, because you do have a lot of salt. Fill your watering can the night before you're going to water and let it sit. If you let it sit, a lot of those chemicals and that salt is going to dissipate off of there, and you're not going to be adding more salt into your pots again. So really good idea. If you can use distilled water, that type of thing, that's great. How many of us want to go to the store and buy distilled water and bring it home? But just letting that water sit out for 24 hours or so makes a huge difference in the chemicals that are in the water. So something to think about when you're watering. The other thing to think about when you're watering is, this is another thing people do, is they've got their plant in this beautiful little pot, and it sits on their antique table, and they don't want a lot of water overflowing, so they come along and they water, and they go, okay, that's enough water. Well, it's not enough water, because you're not getting the entire root ball of that plant. You're not getting water to that entire root ball. You're getting water to one little spot. So the opposite of overwatering is just giving little teaspoons to things and go, well, I give it a teaspoon every day, it'll be fine. Well, it's not, because you're not getting that entire root ball moisture. A lot of times what I do, good or bad, what I do, at least once a month I'll take my pots to the bathtub or my kitchen sink, and I just kind of let that water flush through. Just let it drain, let it run through. You're washing the salts out of there, which is a good thing to do, and you're hydrating that entire root ball. So you're giving that whole thing a really good drain. Sometimes what happens if you've let a plant go too long and it's really dry and it's kind of, that root ball is shrunken up, then you go to put water on it, that water just kind of cascades right around the sides of that root ball, and it's not penetrating in. So you think you've watered it, but it's just sloughed right off, and it hasn't gotten a good drain. So every once in a while, if you can, it's great to take them to the sink or the tub and let water run them. If you've got a plant that's hits the ceiling, you're not going to do that, obviously. But you do want to try occasionally to get a really, really good drink on there and kind of wash the salts and the other chemicals and things that build up in your pots through. And the thing about water is plants don't like water that's really, really cold. They don't like water that's really, really hot. They want a nice tepid water. So occasionally I've taken my plant to the sink and I've thrown it in, and we have that automatic thing that sets your temperature all the time. And I walk back and check it, and it's like really hot. And I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. And I try to put cool water on it. So really important to kind of get that nice, tepid. That's another great reason to kind of set your water out overnight, because then you know it's not going to be real hot, it's not going to be real cold. It's going to be perfect for them. So keep your water temperatures, not too hot, not too cold. That kind of goes along with your room temperatures. Most of the times in our home, we're keeping them pretty average. Most houseplants like between 55 and 75, somewhere in that range. And they're happy with that. They don't mind the temperatures being a little cooler at night. They're fine with that. But when they get really hot, so it's summer and our home got up to 85 or whatever, maybe we were on vacation and the home got really hot, you're going to see some stress on that for your plant. It may drop some leaves, it may get more brown on the edges. You're going to see some stress. It usually will recover from it, but if you have some really big temperature swings, you're going to see stress on your plants from that. So as much as possible, you want to keep it in that 55 to 75. It's not going to be perfect, never is, but do the best you can with that. So maybe that means you don't put a plant in a bright, hot window, right? Because if it's summer and the sun's coming through, would you want to sit there, and bathe? Probably not. Your plant wouldn't either. Is your plant going to be happy in some back bedroom that you never turn the light on and the heat never really gets into there? Probably not going to be real happy most of the time, because it wants some light, doesn't want to be frigid cold all the time. So getting the right conditions for your home and your houseplants is pretty important as well. We have found, Ken and I started using a home humidifier 5-7 years ago. I gotta tell you, it made a huge difference in my houseplants. And I was really, really surprised. We always hear humidity, houseplants like humidity, and I thought, it's true. But when we started using that humidifier, it made a huge difference in just the health of my houseplants, and it made a difference on really how frequently I needed to water. I find with the humidifier, I don't need to water nearly as much. So if you don't have a lot of humidity in your home, you can kind of create a false humidity. So grouping houseplants together, putting a bunch together in a grouping, they like that because they'll kind of create their own little humid environment. So that's a good way to increase that humidity. Doing a double saucer. So if you have a plant and you're putting a saucer underneath it to catch that water, you can put a bigger saucer underneath that, fill it with some pebble or some rock, and kind of keep moisture in there. And as that evaporates up, you're creating a humid environment for it. So you can kind of trick them into having that humidity, but they really do like it. Some plants like it more than others, but that you just kind of got to play with and see what you like. Is there any questions so far?
Is it good to aerate the plant, the house plant?
Pull it out of the pot or put holes in it?
Put holes in it.
It doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt. I mean, if you aerate it, putting holes in that soil to help get airflow through it, certainly isn't going to hurt it at all. You'd want to be careful not to do any major root damage, but most of the time if you're just poking a few holes in there, you're fine. Which brings us to a really good point, thank you very much, is drainage. Plants need good drainage, goes along with that. They don't want to be overly wet. They want good drainage. So you always want to have a pot that has holes in it. Whether you're using a plastic pot, whether you're using a big monster ceramic pot, You're going to want to have a pot that has holes in it. The exception might be cactus, maybe succulents, because you are watering them so infrequently that water isn't going to have a chance to really sit and pool at the bottom and create a bathtub. But most of the time you want some good drainage, which means you probably need a good saucer on the bottom of it, unless you're taking it to your sink and watering it and letting it drain. Potting, yes, ma'am.
What about African violets trying to flush them because it can only be watered from the bottom?
So yes, African violets like to be watered from the bottom, but it's kind of a myth that you cannot water them from the top, because you can. You don't want a lot of water sitting on the leaves at any one time, but you can water it from the top, just carefully, kind of let it flush its way out. It'll be fine with that. African violets, trying to think what else, some of your succulent, they like to pull that water from the top, but to occasionally water from the top isn't going to hurt them. And if you get some water on the leaves, it isn't going to harm them. You just don't want that water sitting on the leaves. You want to kind of dry it off. Any other questions? Yes?
You mentioned little gnats.
Mhm.
Once they arrive, is there any way to get rid of them?
There is, yes. So this is a product called systemic granules, and I should have grabbed another one and I forgot to grab it. The gnat sticks. So with soil gnats, what you basically have, it's a cycle. So the larvae are in the soil. So they're the little itty bitty wormy looking things in the soil. Very hard to see, very, very small. So that's the larvae stage. Those larvae become adults, and those are the ones that are flying around irritating you. So you've got to break that cycle from the larvae to the adult. You can do one or the other, or you can do two in conjunction with each other. So this is systemic granules. What this does is kills the larvae in the soil. The way to use this product is give your plants a good drink. You apply this, it gives you directions in the back. It's like a teaspoon per 6-inch pot, blah, blah, blah. You just spread them on lightly. You water it in lightly. And then you let the plants go as dry as you can possibly let them go before you go to water again. Because what you don't want to do is put this on, give a good drink, and you're flushing all of this down to the bottom of the pot. Well, your gnats are in the first 1 to 2 inches of soil. That's where they like to hang out. So this kills the larvae. So this is a really good product to use. Some people, it is a chemical. I'll be honest with you. It's a chemical. It kills the larvae. Some people are very sensitive. They don't want that in their home. Totally respect that. In which case, this is a little sticky trap. So it's got it's stuck in there. It's literally stuck in there. So these are little yellow, see the yellow on there? So they're very attracted to that yellow color. So you put these in a few places around in your plants, and they are attracted to that yellow, and the adults get stuck to it. So you're killing the adults with this one. So the trick is you kill enough adults, they're not going to make babies that are hanging out in the soil, so you're breaking that cycle of it. A lot of people will use the two together. Some people, like I said, will only use the sticky traps because they don't want the chemical in their home. Yes, ma'am?
Would you do that for maintenance or only when you see a problem?
This or that?
Either.
Either one. These I could use any time. I think it wouldn't hurt at all because you're just kind of tucking them around. They're not going to be obvious. This I wouldn't use unless I had a problem. So if you actually have an ongoing problem, this is great. I wouldn't necessarily use it as a preventative. That's just my personal opinion. The other thing you can do, if you don't want to use either one, is you can take the top 2 to 3 inches of the soil off of your houseplants and put fresh soil in. And then hopefully you're getting rid of the larvae that are hanging out in there. Make sure when you do that you're using a good potting soil on top. Make sure you're using a fresh potting soil, not something from your other pots or something you had outside, or even something that you had sitting in your garage. Because those little tiny gnats, they get in anywhere. I mean, they sneak in. So you want to make sure you're dealing with fresh potting soil when you put fresh soil in your pots. So those are a few options you can do for the gnats. It kind of comes down to how many, and how much effort and time and products you want to use. Fresh potting soil. Sometimes your houseplants just need some fresh potting soil on them. Always make sure you're going with a clean potting soil and a good potting soil. A good potting soil will have peat moss in it. It'll have either a vermiculite or a perlite in it. And what that does is just allows really good drainage. And it allows for little air pockets in there. So you're getting that oxygen. Any more questions on that? Okay. There it was. Well, we're talking about soil gnats and other insects. This is triple action. This is a great organic product if you have other issues. If you have mealybug, if you have aphids, other insects that can go after, have spider mites, that kind of thing. The triple action is a really good product to use. It is an organic product. It is neem oil and pyrethrum. So it's a really good product to use. Read the label though, because if you have a sensitive plant, if you have an African violet, some of the succulents, or if you have a plant that's sensitive, you would want to read and make sure you're not going to do any harm because it is an oil. So the way this works is it actually coats those insects and kind of suffocates them. I do recommend take it to a sink tub or outside to spray it. Some people don't care for the odor. It doesn't bother me, but I'm pretty sure my olfactory senses are shot at this point in my life. But if you're sensitive to smells, take it outside and spray. Just make sure you bring your plant back in before it gets cold or hot. But a really good product just to have on hand for those instances where those aphids and other little weird insects show up. I've had a few people try this for soil gnats, spraying the soil with it. I have not heard back how it worked for them. So, but that might be another option, but I don't have a lot of data to back that up at this time.
Is that okay for outdoor too?
It is. Yeah, that's why it's a nice one. Indoor, outdoor, it's a great organic spray. So we touched on watering, potting soil, fertilizing. I like Schultz. It's probably one of my favorite fertilizers. It has been around for eons and eons and eons. It's a really nice, mild fertilizer. It's not going to burn, and it doesn't have the salts in it. So I'm going to say the word, Miracle-Gro. Miracle-Gro has a lot of salt in their product, and we don't need that, right? Because we already have that issue. We don't need to make it worse. So using a product that doesn't have the high salts in it is very beneficial. I like Schultz. It has a little dropper already built in. So this little thing is a dropper. So you're just putting your little drops in the water. So it makes it really easy to use. You can use it every time you water if you want to. It's that mild. Or you just use it periodically. It kind of depends on what. I'll have to admit, I am not the best at fertilizing my houseplants because I just kind of forget about it. But the great thing about this is you could put it in your water. So if you have your water out the night before, put your drops in, have it sit, it's ready to go for when you want to water. This also comes in, Schultz makes a cactus food, which is really nice, same liquid formula. And they make an African violet food. Which is nice because the African violet has a little bit higher middle number, which is that phosphorus, so it works for any plant that blooms. African violets, orchids, jasmines, all those little house plants that you want to keep in bloom a lot, it's wonderful for that. And I do have those, I just forgot to bring the samples up to you. But Schultz is a really great food. Yes?
Does it matter whether it's liquid or like the granules?
It doesn't. If you have a granular that you like, I think there's Osmocote is a granular one. Those are great too. The only thing I would say is just make sure it's not so high it's going to burn things. And if you're using a granular, I also recommend that it be slow release. So slow release, like Osmocote is coated so that it just kind of breaks down slowly. So you're not going to get any kind of burn in there. But yeah, you don't want one that's going to release a lot of stuff all at once. The plant really can't take it up that quickly. Good burner. So that's really important. Good houseplant food. Soils. We'll go through soils really quick too. So if you're doing African violets, use an African violet soil because it's got a lot more peat moss in it. It's got things that the African violets want. We also carry, and I didn't bring it up here, if you're doing an orchid, you want to use an orchid soil or orchid bark. So some orchids only want bark, they don't want actual soil around them. So find out what your plant wants and kind of try to give it the right soil for it so that it's happier. You give it the right conditions, it could be a happy camper. Same thing for if you're doing succulents or cactus, use a cactus or succulent mix because this has more sand in it. So that sand allows for better drainage. It's not going to hold on to that water, so your plants are a lot happier with the soil that has a little more drainage to it. So if you're doing cactus and succulents, get the right soil for them. They're going to be a lot happier. Yes, ma'am.
So the Christmas cactus, it's a cactus.
Yes. Yes.
It's so green.
Right. But it's kind of in that succulent family, and it doesn't want to be constantly wet. So a good cactus succulent soil is excellent for it. Any questions? All right. A couple other things I'll hit on real quick since we're on product. So this is root and grow. If you're transplanting your plants, which do not be quick to transplant your plants. So a lot of times you bought a plant at the garden center, you brought it home, you're like, I need to transplant it. No, a lot of your plants really like a tight shoe or a small pot. They don't want to be put into something bigger right away. They really don't mind being in a smaller pot, so don't be in a hurry. I recommend at least 6 months to a year before you would want to transplant it into a bigger pot. Now, if you're going to take it and you're going to put it in a pretty ceramic pot, try to get a ceramic pot that's close to that size or just a hair bigger. You don't want to take this tiny little pot and put it in a great big pot because you're going to do a couple of things if you do that. Number one, it's going to spend all its time going, I need to fill this space with my roots, and it spends all its time putting out roots. And when it's doing that, it's not doing any of the green top, right? So the plant's the same size as a year ago when you brought it, because it's been focusing on rooting out. The other thing it does is if we put it in a great big pot with a bunch of soil in it, we're either going to overwater it, because we're trying to get all that soil wet, or we're going to grossly underwater it, because we don't want to fill all that water in there, right? So just try to keep it in the same pot if you can, or close to the same size for quite a while. Another trick, if you have this gorgeous pot, you're like, but I want that plant in this pot. Well, you can kind of do you can kind of trick it. So you could get another pot and turn it upside down and stick it in there, and you're sitting it on that pot. So it sits up higher, looks like it's planted in there, but it's not. The other thing you can do is keep this pot, fill the rest of it with soil, but keep it in this pot. And when you water it, remember, oh, I've only got that little pot in there, so don't water the extra dirt. But a couple little tricks you can do if you really have a beautiful, beautiful pot you want to use, but it's bigger. Either prop it up or leave it in the same size pot and just put dirt around it, and then worry about transplanting it later. Does that make sense? If you get to the point where you're like, okay, I've had this plant for 10 years in this pot, it needs to be in something bigger. So you can kind of tell if it needs to be transplanted if all you're doing is watering it. You can't get enough water to it, probably needs to be transplanted. If you water it and the water just goes woof, right off the top of it, it needs to be transplanted. When you transplant, you pull it out of that pot that it's in. You want to lightly loosen those roots, just lightly, on the sides and on the bottom. Because when we put it in that new pot, that new soil, we want those roots to go, oh, okay, I can go out. I can move out and fill this pot. Instead of just going, oh, I'm still in this little pot, I'm just going to keep doing this thing. So you do want to lightly loosen those roots. You can also use root and grow. So this is a planting product that helps with transplant shock. So it helps that when you've loosened up those roots, you've moved into a new home, it's kind of going, so this helps with that. It's a very light fertilizer. Also has a lot of great mycorrhizas and that type of thing in it that help reduce that shock. So it's a great product to use. When you open it, I try to warn people, it doesn't look very pretty. It has kind of a look to it, but it's a wonderful product. It's not going to have a big stink to it. First time I used it on my houseplants, I was a little leery of it because of the way it looked, but the way it really helped my plants, I was very impressed. I had a big Ming Aurelia. I had one of these. I had a Ming Aurelia that was about 6 foot tall. And we went out of town for a week and a half, I can't remember. Came home and it was crispy. The house had gotten hot, we didn't like it. Came home, half of it was dried up. And I thought, well, you know, last resort, this was a new product we were trying, so I mixed it up, I used it on it. I was very, very impressed at how it brought back my Aurelia. And I don't know how many of you grow Ming Aurelias, but I think they're one of the hardest things I've ever grown in my life. And I was very happy with it. So if you have a plant that's stressed, or if you're going to be doing some transplanting, excellent product to use. Don't be afraid to use it. And yes, you can use it on your outdoor plants, trees, shrubs as well. Indoors, excellently, works just as well. One more little product. Yeah, like I was? Yeah.
While you're talking about transplanting, what if you want to go the other direction? You don't, when you really like the pot it's in, you don't want to take it out. If you trim it back, are there better ways to trim it? So you're not damaging?
So if you're root pruning, it's tricky. Depends on the plant. Some plants would be fine with that. I mean, if I were to take a pothos and root prune it, it could probably care less. If I were to take a Ming Aurelia and root prune it, it would probably curl up its leaves, kick up its toes, and go, I'm out of here. So it kind of depends on the plant and just how sensitive it is.
You can't just like trim back the leaves and...
You can, but that root ball is still that root ball. It's still going to maintain that root size. If you like your plants nice and shiny, it's spray vinegar. Isn't that pretty? So this is Green Glow. It's a plant polish. Not everybody likes to use it. Totally understand. I like to use it occasionally because it blows the dust off my plants, because our plants sit in our homes and they get kind of dusty dirty, right? So it's always a good idea to hose them off in the shower, clean them up, get that dust off of them. They're much happier with that. But this is a polisher. Great to kind of shine up those plants, to get the water spots off. Really makes things look really, really pretty. Be careful, it is an aerosol, so you don't want to, right next to it. You want to give it a light spraying, at least 12 inches away. And there again, if you're not sure if it will work on your plant, read the label. Do not use it on succulents, don't use it on African violets, probably wouldn't use it on an orchid. So it's not for every plant, but it is a really good polisher to make things look really, really pretty and nice and green. Any questions?
You get the dust off first and then you use it.
Depends on the plant. So if it's a plant with a little tiny leaf, I'm not going to. My plants with bigger leaves, yeah, I'll take it and wipe it off. Sometimes I'll take my houseplants and just throw them in the shower and run the shower head over them, because that gets the dust off as well. And just kind of let them dry in there. So different kinds of plants. So if you're brand new beginner and you haven't had much success with houseplants, there's plants you can start with that are so easy to grow. They're the best ones to start with. Or if you're giving them as a gift to somebody that you're not really sure, there's great plants to start with. Number one being the one in my hand. So this is a Sansevieria, otherwise known as mother-in-law's tongue. We'll just let that one go. And also, it has another name.
Snake plant.
Snake plant, thank you. That's my one. Great plant to grow because it tolerates a lot of things. It loves to go dry, really dry. Probably, if you had it in your home, at the most, you'd be watering it twice a month. If your home is like mine, where I have a higher humidity level, maybe every 3 weeks. So it takes very, very little water. It's a great plant to put in those spots that maybe you can't reach into all the time, but you want a plant there. Mother-in-law's tongue is a great plant for that. About the only way you can really kill it is overwater it. And you know you've overwatered it when you go to pull on it, and the whole thing just comes right out. This is no roots. That you know you've overwatered. The other great thing about this plant is it can take a wide variety of sunlight. So it can take a bright room, it can take a dark room. So it's really nice in that you can stick it in those corners that maybe aren't getting as bright a light, and it's perfectly happy doing that. So it's a wonderful plant. Yes, ma'am?
I have seen plants like that that are huge, really tall. Same plant, or is there a different variety?
So within, so she was asking about, she's seen really tall ones of these. There's a lot of variety within Sansevieria, the group of Sansevieria. There's some that only get like so tall. There's a little bird's nest one that gets maybe 4 or 5 inches tall. And you're right, there's some that get 6, 7 feet. You know, you see them growing. This will, I mean, they will, some will eventually get very, very tall. Others will stay medium, some will stay shorter. Depends on the variety within that group, that family. Great one to put in. The other one that I really love. So this is a ZZ plant, or it's Zamucolis zamzifolius. So we just say ZZ plant. Another one that you hardly ever have to water. There again, in most homes, maybe twice a month. I water mine about once a month, to be honest with you. And they all do wonderful. The thing I love about it, see this nice glossy green leaf? I didn't spray this plant with the shine. It just naturally has this really beautiful dark green glossy leaf. So it's a beautiful, beautiful little plant. Low water use. There again, it can take different lights. It can take a bright sunny room. It can take a dark or a shaded room. So it's another, these two are probably my favorite for ease of care. Just because you don't have to do a lot to them. They pretty consistently look good. You don't have to do a lot of pruning of dead leaves off of them. You hardly ever get dead leaves on them. So just really easy to take care of, easy plants. This is a jade. So this is in that succulent family. Anything in the succulent family, you're watering maybe there again, maybe twice a month. Unless it was in a really hot window that's pretty warm, then you may have to increase that. But there again, they want to go almost completely dry between their waterings. So it's one of those plants, anything in the succulent, the cactus family, the euphorbia family. They're great if you travel a lot, but you still want some houseplants in your home. Excellent for that, because you can leave for 2 or 3 weeks and you don't have to have somebody come in and take care of your plants, right? Because they kind of take care of themselves. So anything in this, I love this jade because it's got this red on the edge of the leaf. Isn't that pretty? I just think that's so pretty. Put it in a red pot. Gorgeous. Another plant that is a low water use plant that you wouldn't think to look at it. When I look at this plant, I think tropical. It must need water, lots of water. But this is a Chinese evergreen. They, again, hardly need, maybe twice a month. There again, unless it's up high or maybe you got a vent blowing on it or something, it might need more water. Beautiful little plant, low water use. There again, it can take low light. It also can take a bright room. So that's a great one. And another while we're on low water use plants is Dracaena. Dracaenas are pretty common. A lot of people have them. The main thing that you find with Dracaenas is they get that little black tip on the end. And that's easy to take care of. You can just kind of take your scissors and trim it off, or take your little nippers, just kind of trim it off. But low water use, moderate light. I wouldn't necessarily put it into a dark room, but a moderately bright room like we're sitting in here, it would be very, very happy in. And low water use. And within Dracaenas, you got tons of variety, right? So this is another variety of Dracaena. So you get some that have the real thin leaves, you get some that have the thicker leaves. You see ones that have the real long cane and the little poof at the top. So there's a lot of variety within Dracaena. All of them you treat pretty much the same. Don't overwater. And then just kind of keep them clean. You can see the damage on that one. See a little bit of the brown on the leaf. I would just take my scissors and just trim it. And be happy camper. So within Dracaenas, there's a lot of variety, a lot of colors. Really cool plant to grow, to give you a lot of variety. So those are some of the really easy care. You can't forget pothos, right? How many of you own a pothos? Who doesn't own a pothos? Pothos are wonderful little plants. If you want a hanging plant, a draping plant, a plant to put up on a shelf, just easy care. I mean, they really aren't susceptible to a lot of insects. More of a moderate water user, so you'd probably be watering, every week to week and a half on these guys. But these little things that grow out, I like to keep mine a little shorter because then it keeps the top a little fuller. Some people like to grow these little suckers out, and they got them running along their kitchen wall, running down the hallway, the bathrooms. But if you want to keep that head nice and full, you got to pinch it back occasionally. Keep the nice full head on it. But it's a wonderful little hanging plant.
I have a question.
Yes.
So for the plants, like some of mine, they're turning lighter. How do you get them like a deeper green? Do I need to feed it with something else?
You need to feed them consistently. So she's asking about her plants. Some of her leaves are starting to turn a lighter color. Usually when you see that, it's one of two things. You need to feed it more consistently, and then make sure you're not overwatering. Because when you overwater, you're kind of washing the nutrients out, the roots aren't as healthy as they need to be, so they're kind of fading out. So watch your watering.
How often would you feed it?
It depends on the food that you're using. So like if I was using the Schultz plant food, I could use it every time. I could feed it every time I watered it. Depends on the fertilizer that you're using. So read the directions. So if you're using like an Osmocote, that slow release, you probably use it once a month or so. So read the directions on your fertilizer. But pothos, another easy, nice hanging plant. Then we'll get into some of the more persnickety plants. Ferns. Who grows a fern? Bless you. I cannot grow a fern to save my soul, and I don't know why. But I have tried and tried and tried. I love ferns. I think they're so cool. Basically, I grow them outside in the summertime, and then I just wave goodbye to them at the first frost because I know if I bring it inside. But some people grow ferns and they grow them wonderfully. And I'm always like, well, what are you doing that I'm not doing? But ferns are they love humidity. They just love a really nice, humid room. They also are more moisture loving. So maybe if you're a person that really likes to water a lot, maybe this is the plant for you. They definitely need to be more on the moist side continually than especially some of these other plants. Great for a lot of people grow them in bathrooms, kitchens where there's just more humidity in general. You can put them outside in the summertime in a shady spot and then bring them back in the winter. Like I said, I love them on my front porch in the summer, but I know if I bring it in, it's just going to start dropping leaves. But ferns are fun. Like I said, some people are very successful with them. This is a croton, oak leaf croton. I love the color in this plant. And the more light that it gets, the more color it will get. So if you have a nice bright room, it'll get more oranges and reds to it. It is actually a spectacularly beautiful plant. But to keep that coloring in it, it's going to want a nice bright room to have that. It's also another one that's kind of that medium moisture, probably once a week watering. Yes, sir. Croton, C-R-O-T-O-N. Croton. Croton. This one's an Oakley croton. There's other ones that have more just an oval or oblong leaf to them. So there's a couple different varieties within that as well. But just, it's really, really pretty. You just got to have the right light for it to be happy in. It's also not going to want to be near a heat source. So if you have a furnace blowing down on it, or you know, in the summer if your air conditioning is running and blowing on it, not going to be real happy with that. So those are something to really think about when you're placing your plants in your room, is most of your plants are not going to want a hot furnace blowing on them or cold air blowing on them. Particularly ficus. I don't have, anybody has a Benjamin ficus? Oh my God, you look at those things wrong and they go, what? You know, so anything different they don't like. So you really want to keep some of your plants out of those sources of heat and cold blowing on them. But that's a croton.
Lisa?
Yes.
My croton gets really long and lady.
So it's probably not, two things, probably not getting enough light, but you can also get some stakes and just kind of stake it in your pot so that it's not flopping, because it's kind of flopping over.
Yeah, and it is going towards the light.
Yeah.
It's really nice.
Yeah, so I would probably get a real skinny little green stake and just stake it up into your pot. It'll be fine with that. Mignorelias, these are not for the faint of heart, but cool plant. But there again, it comes, you know, if you've grown houseplants successfully and wonderfully and you want to branch out a little bit, this is a great plant for that. This is not a plant I would give to somebody who thinks they have brown thumbs. I wouldn't give it to my best friend because they're going to go, I killed your plant. But it's a really cool little plant. It needs real even moisture, but it doesn't like to be overly wet. So you can't keep it too wet, but you got to keep that moisture level even. It likes a nice bright room. It's another one that's very, very temperamental if it's getting hot air or cold air blowing on it. By a front door where you're going in and out, would not be happy. But it's just a really cool plant. Within Aurelias, there again, it's a huge family of plants. Some have big round leaves. You can see the little stumps. This is the way they grow. They cut them and to make them branch out more. But just a really unique plant. Now this plant. So I ordered houseplants this last week. I'm like, oh. So this is called a money tree, or Pecoria is the botanical name. Money tree is kind of a common name. I don't know why they call it a money tree. I should find that out. But it said Pecoria stumps. I'm like, oh, cool, money trees. We need some money trees. I'll bring them in. Well, this is how they came in. What do you guys think?
It's interesting.
It's interesting. That's what I said. I think this would be really cool if you have a lot of plants and you want to try something different. I just think it looks really different and cool. It'd be a really neat one, like on a coffee table or a table, you know, where you would come up people's specimen plant kind of thing. At first, I was just like, oh my goodness, what did I order? But it's kind of growing on me a little bit. I might bring one home to try it. The money tree it's another plant that I'm really trying to figure out how to grow. I think I have kept them too wet in the past, and I don't know if you guys remember Ella. She used to work here. She's like our houseplant queen. She said, no, you can let them go dry. So I kind of tried that, and it wasn't real happy. So I'm trying to figure it out. And I think the lesson from that is nobody's going to be an expert on every plant.
Yeah.
You're going to bring some plants into your home that you think is gonna do wonderfully and you have just the right spot, but it doesn't perform well. And you just kinda gotta go, okay, for whatever reason, this plant and I are not getting along in this space, so maybe you need to move it to another space. Maybe you need to try and increase the watering. Sometimes you need to try to decrease the watering. Nature is not always perfect, right? And as part of gardening, part of learning is you're not always going to be 100% successful, but it's fun to try. So I think I'm going to bring one of these home to try it again, just because it's fun to try it. It's unique looking and different, so I want to see what it does. You're not always going to have the perfect plant in the perfect spot the first time. So many plants do. A couple that I really like, just because I like the colorings and what they do. So this is a spathiphyllum or peace lily. A great little plant for low light. If you have a low light area, it's perfect for that. The thing I like about it is it does make this little bloom, this little lily. It's actually, I think, a bract, if I remember correctly. Really cool when it blooms, right? Very, very pretty. It's probably one of the thirstier plants that you'll have. So great for those people that like to water a lot. Get a peace lily. I've also seen people take these, I don't know if they do it as much anymore, but you can take them out of the pot, wash the soil off of them, and put them, I've seen them where they put them in like a big vase, and then they put like a betta fish down below, so the fish is living in there. So it can live without soil on it, just stuck into the water. Kind of cool that way, yeah. So that's spathiphyllum or peace lily. This, I love the coloring on the leaf, that two-tone. This is a calthea. There again, calthea is a big family of plants. This one, it also has one that is a narrower leaf to it. But I just love the coloring on it. It's very, very pretty. Kind of a moderate light plant, moderate water, pretty easy to take care of. Just a pretty little plant. And sometimes if you're trying a new plant, but you don't want to buy a big 8-inch, $40 plant, you want to start small. Sometimes these little 5-inch pot guys are really easy to start with if you're trying a new variety or you just want to experiment a little bit. That's a good way to go, start with a smaller one. Bromeliad. I love these because I love the colors. They're so bright and so dynamic. And that bloom will stay on there for months and months and months and months. So it really is a fun way to bring color into your home. Very easy care, just likes a bright room. Don't keep it too wet. It doesn't like to be overly wet. But just, if you want some color in, this is a great, easy way to do it. And I'll be honest with you, when it goes out of bloom, and I hate to say this, but I throw it away. Because I know I'm not going to be able to get it to come back into bloom. Now some of you are probably, you can get anything to grow back into bloom and you do wonderfully with it, but I know me, and I know I won't be able to, so I just kind of throw them away and go buy another one. Because I've literally had them stay with the blossom on it for over a year.
Wow.
So it can do that. Nice way to add color. Tillandsias, or air plants. Fun little plants to play with, mess around with. They don't have roots. They don't need roots. They don't need to be in soil. But they do still need some moisture. So what we do with ours is once a week or so, we throw them into a big tub and let them soak for about 10, 15 minutes. Then we pull them out, shake the water off of them. You don't want that water to sit in there or you will rot them out. So shake the water out and then just put them back where you had them. Really neat if you have like a little, I've seen little teacups and little decorative stuff where people don't really want to plant into it, but they'll just stick that in there. So really fun plants to try. They come in big, they come in itty bitty, they come with some colors on the edges of them. Just a really cool plant to kind of mess around with, have fun with.
What's it called?
Tillandsia, or air plant is more the common name. And actually, a bromeliad is, am I right? A bromeliad is a variety of air plant, is the way they grow, believe it or not. That's why it doesn't like to be overwatered too much. Okay. Did I cover?
What's a spider plant?
Spider plant. I do have a spider plant. I hope I can make these things So that's a spider plant. Usually you'll see them, airplane plant is the other name for them. So they're the ones that produce all those little babies that hang down. And this one's not doing it right now, but it'll have all these little stems that grow down and hit out like a little mini spider plant on the bottom of it, which you can cut off and start rooting, and off you go. You can have a bunch of them. This is a really, there again, it falls under, to me, this falls under that easy care plant. Takes a bright room, good light, moderate water, but it's not fussy. And not a lot of insects that tend to get on it, so it's a really good easy care plant as well. Also one that you can put outside in the summertime in a shady spot or a porch. Just make sure you bring it back in before that first frost, but they do wonderfully outside in the summertime. So spider plants, very, very good plant. Some plants are more susceptible to certain types of insects. So the Aurelia that I was talking about, very susceptible to spider mite. So, which is, you know, spider mite is really a challenge to get rid of once it really gets going in a plant. So, you know, this is one of those things, if you have a spider mite issue, they also get onto ivies a lot. So if you have an ivy inside, whether grape leaf or English ivy, spider mite is a really common insect on that. So it's something that I know I have to look for consistently and get a hold of it before it gets too within the plant.
What do they look for?
Say again?
Spider mites? What are you looking for?
Spider mites are really hard to see. They're itty bitty, tiny little insect. They get on your plants and they basically sucking the life out of it. Sometimes your plant, if a plant looks dusty, sometimes that's a spider mite in there. Sometimes it's really fine webbing with little dots in it. Those are good indications of spider mite. And like I said, some plants are very susceptible to them, so you just kind of got to watch for that. Mealybug is another one that get onto sort of like jades, hoyas, some of the succulents. So mealybug almost looks like little cotton balls, little pieces of cotton. It's usually right up against the stem. And that's another one. You just get, once you see it, get a hold on it really quickly, because it'll take over really rapidly. So, you know, when you're purchasing a plant, ask, is there anything I really need to look for insect-wise? Spider mites, mealybugs, aphids. Ask about it, so that way you know to go look, kind of keep an eye out, and see if it starts to show up, then you can get it taken care of right away. Some plants are easy care, really not a lot goes after them. Other plants, you gotta watch, you gotta be aware, you can't just ignore them. Yes, ma'am?
Do you ever replace the soil on old plants?
Yes, so her question is replacing the soil, and I do recommend that, you know, especially if it's been in that same pot for a long time. It's a really good idea. You could, if you don't want to transplant it, if you're going to keep it in the same pot, you can pull it out, kind of knock some of that dirt off of there, and then refill it. Again, making sure you're using fresh, good potting soil. I don't know how many times people use dirt from their yard for their houseplants. Are you kidding me? You know, if you think about our dirt, it's horrible. Just don't, even if you're doing a cactus or a succulent, get the right soil, because it just makes a huge difference. But yes, replacing the soil, if it's been in that same pot, it's a good idea.
About how long?
Oh, I would say
I've got a
that's
jade plant that's 20 years old.
20 years old.
Yeah.
It's probably time. It
But
may
is there
be
a
time to
general-
move it up into another pot too. Yeah, and that's another thing. So when you're transplanting your plants, no matter how long they've been in that pot, you only want to go one size up. Don't go from this little pot to this pot. Go one size up. Be reasonable about it. Yep. Yes.
I have a 10-foot tall fiddle leaf fig. It's actually 3 in a big pot. And it had the bamboo things holding it. Okay, so now it's growing over the bamboo and the top is starting to go like this. So I hate to get rid of it, but if I cut it off, will it kill it
No.
from the top?
No.
Oh,
You
okay.
can cut it back.
Oh, okay, all
Or
right.
you find- Or you get a longer bamboo pole. But yeah, you can trim your plants back. You know, some of them, lend themselves more to it than others.
Okay.
But you can definitely do that with the ficus.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Yes.
With regard to the ZZ plant,
Uh-huh.
can you take cuttings from that? I've got one that's huge and the branches are like
Yeah.
3 feet long, but
Right.
and it keeps sending up shoots, but
Uh-huh.
I'd like to pull it out of there and start some smaller ones. Can I
Right.
just cut the branch off?
So, yeah, you could probably do it a couple different ways. So you could trim it and then use a cutting,
Yeah.
what do you call it?
Root
Help me, Sharon, help.
stuff.
Yeah, a rooting powder, and then start it that way. These plants also, I don't know if I can do it without, they almost grow in like little worms or bulbs
Yeah,
almost, and you could separate it out of there and start it that way too. If, when those stems get really long, don't be afraid to cut them back. They're fine with that. You can trim that back so it stays more upright than big and floppy. So don't be afraid to trim those
Is there
plants.
a special place you should cut when you're trimming, like next to a leaf? that is-
I always trim next to a leaf that's, I wouldn't want to do it right in the middle here because then I got this ugly stump. I would prune it down to where that next leaf is coming out at.
Right, okay.
Yeah. And then like some, like a pellfish, you can cut it anyway. Any other questions? Yes.
African violets again. Okay, I have some, and then the bottom leaves are drooping,
Mhm.
and other ones are nice.
Mhm.
So is it shedding leaf naturally, or is it needs water?
So her question is, her African violet, the bottom leaves are drooping. So when you see that drooping, it's one of two things. And I can't tell you what it is unless I saw the plant in front of me. It could be it needs more moisture. It could be it's staying too wet. So if I had to guess, I would say because it's the bottom leaves, it might be staying too wet. Because it's the bottom leaves. So usually when things are overwatered, it's the bottom and the inside leaves that start to turn first. If it's underwater, if it's staying too dry, it's usually the outer and the top leaves that start to show damage first. So I would check your watering. A lot of people use the self-watering pots with the African violets, which is a really cool concept because you're putting water in the pot and then the other one sits in there. But the thing that people don't think about is you don't want to leave water in this pot. You let it sit there for a while, but then you want to toss that water. You don't want it constantly sitting in water. So if I had to guess, I'd say overwatering, but kind of do some checking yourself, get a nice moisture meter, and check it out. So we do transplanting here. So you can see we have a lot of beautiful ceramic pots. We do transplanting. It's $1 per inch. So if it's a 6-inch pot we're transplanting, it'd be $6. It's a 12-inch, it'd be $12. So we are more than happy to transplant for you guys. We do it all the time. I know some people don't want the mess of their house and all that kind of stuff, so, yes, yeah, yes. We treat it, we do everything, we have it all ready for you to pick up when you're ready. So if you're at a point where you do want to transplant a pot or you just want a really pretty ceramic pot, we're happy to help you with that, definitely. And use good potting soil when you do it. So, you guys have been great. Thank you so much. And remember, next week, same time, same place, if you're interested, wildflower seeds. So, be here for that. Thank you.